Hi everyone, this is this month's acrylic lesson, and I'm going to be doing this painting which was requested, and you'll find that as a JPEG to download so that you can paint along. Just download it, print it out, whatever size you like. And I'll just show you what materials we're going to be using today. I've got one of my old canvases. You can see on the back I've used it a lot for a pouring, and I didn't like the result, so I've just painted over it with the leftover paint from my last session. So what was left on my palette after I did a commission that I finished this morning, I just put that on here because it's going to be a kind of overcast day, so I've just used those overcast kind of colours as a base. You don't need to do that, but because I wanted to cover up the painting underneath, I mixed it with just some plain gesso and popped it on, let it dry, and we're all ready to go. What else are we using today? For this painting we're going to be using some ultramarine blues, purple straight out of the tube. I've got a few greens out of the tube which I don't like using much, but I do mix them with others to use. I'll be putting in some yellow ochre, and I've got some burnt umber here and some raw sienna and a little touch of orange over there for another painting, but I might add some orange into this painting too. I have some Liquitex Ultramatte gel. Any sort of gel medium for any brand will work for this. It's just to add a little bit of structure when we get to some of the grasses. If you don't have it, don't worry, just use thick paint. I'm using mostly the Atelier Interactive. They mix well. I have here a little bit of liquefying, this Atelier liquefying medium. That just makes for, you mix it in with the paint and it makes it very thin and slippery, and you can make little thin strokes of grass if you want to. Then I've got some palette knives. If you don't have any palette knives, just use an old credit card, the edge of an old credit card, a piece of thick, sturdy cardboard, a piece of plastic cut out of a milk bottle, anything like that will do. Then I've got my water bucket with a selection of brushes. So I'll be using all those bits and pieces and maybe adding to them as we go, but that's the basics that we're going to use. If you don't have a canvas, don't worry, just use paper. You can paint on watercolour paper, any paper that you like. It's going to be hard to show you close-ups of the painting and the reference image, but you have the reference image, so you can download that, and I'll try and put it up in the corner as well. Let's get painting. So we're starting off with the reference, and I'm going to be just sketching it in there. So I'll pop that next to it, and I'll just roughly rough it in. And the way I do that is just taking a flat chiseled brush and using a little bit of diluted paint to sketch in the main lines. And in this case, I'm using a bit of one of those modified greens. So I'm just using one of my dark greens and mixing it up with an ultramarine blue and a little bit of brown there, just to get a fairly neutral colour. And I'm just carefully checking where I want these marks, just to give me a little starter, and that's going to be the forest trees. The meadow runs down, slants down, like so. There's some bushes over here which I'm just going to give a little block in. And then I want to roughly sketch in where that little river's going to go. So I'm using just a tiny bit of white and some blue. Just want that area to be quite light. So you can see I've just mixed up a lightish sort of blue, just to give me an idea. It's hard to work out exactly. It looks like a pond with a little bit of waterway through it. So I'm just going to sketch that in just to give me an idea. And I'm just pulling some of that down because it's reflections from the sky, and that's just to give me an idea of where that is. So none of this is very finish. It's just an idea of placement to see if I'm happy with that. And then there's, coming along here, there's a bit of the creek, and that's a green, sort of greeny, bluey colour. And I'm just going to start putting that in and have it come out there. So thinking about our composition as we're doing this. And I'm just scrubbing it in, and then I can see if I'm happy with my composition. So today I didn't do any thumbnails because I wanted to fairly well follow this photograph, and it's very nicely proportioned as it is. So they're my main shapes. I've got another little hillock there, which I'm just going to use a tiny touch of yellow ochre in to remind me that that's going to be. So that all comes back from the pond there and becomes a bit of a more yellow topped. That's given me an idea of the major shapes, except for the sky and all those clouds, and that's going to be a feature, so now we need to think about those. So what I'm going to do is do the sky first, and then we'll move on to the landscape. So for the sky, you can see in the reference there's a lot of clouds. You really can't see any of the blue sky itself, so it's going to be a whole lot of overlapping clouds, and some are lighter areas. Let's move that a little bit closer. Some are lighter, sunlit tops, and some are darker. What I need to do is mix up a whole lot of greys. You'll remember that last month, the month before, we did some colour mixing, and so there's some charts on Patreon for how to mix up some greys, interesting greys, and we'll just do some of that now as we go. So for these clouds, what I want to do is to start mixing up a grey mixture, which is going to be ultramarine blue, some purple, and a little bit of, I'm just going to add a little bit of white to some of that, and not mixing it in too much. So I've got the ultramarine blue, some purple, and a little bit of white, and you can see there's some different lots of purpley grey sort of colours on there. I can add in a tiny touch of yellow to give another colour. So there we go. I don't want to add more than 3 colours, or that's going to make it very muddy. So I'm just taking that, and then I'm looking for where the dark areas of my clouds are, and I'm just blotting those in with little taps with my flat brush. And they don't have to be perfect. Right now I'm just looking for all the dark shapes and starting to put those in. And I'm just pushing it into the canvas, onto the canvas, in a quite random way. There's a lot of it over here, so I'm putting a lot of that in. And as I go, I might take a little bit more of the blue and mix it in if I want it to be a little bit darker, and that's what I'm doing here for these. So I'm just paying attention to the values that are in here. Putting in those darkest ones to start with, and that'll be where I can go from. And because they're clouds and I can move them around if I want to, if I don't like the composition, if you want to change it slightly, it's not very pleasing to you for some reason, you just move those clouds around. You're in charge. So you can see I'm starting to get some of the darker clouds in, just patting it on. I'm going to add a slight touch of alizarin crimson now, and just add that in to make it a more warmer dark. So I'm just warming up and giving some pink to those clouds now. And I can see the pink in there. If you can't see the pink in there, never fear. Just use the old rule of you want some warms next to some cools to start some contrast going, and pop those in. Don't overmix it on your palette. Let some of the work happen on the canvas or the paper. We'll just make for more variations. So I've got that dark mass in. Down here, so it's a more purpley, pinky colour up there, and it gets bluer as we come towards the horizon. So I'm just adding in a little bit more blue as we come down, and a little bit more white because it's not so dark here. And I'm just putting those, now I'm putting those in along the horizon there, scrubbing it in just any old how with my brush. There's quite a lot of backgroundy, streaky clouds across there, so I'm just going to put those in like so, running the brush across the surface there, rather than doing it in that dabby way I was doing it. I'm now just running it right across the surface because they're different clouds. So look at your clouds and think, what kind of clouds are they? Are they the fluffy big ones like these ones, or are they more flat ones? They've all got names. I'm flat out remembering humans' names, so I can't really remember the cloud names. Well, I can remember the names, but then I can't remember them in the right context. So here we've got flatter clouds, and here we've got the more rounded scuddy clouds. So I'm just putting in that. Up here it's much lighter, and I'm going to get a clean brush. And now I'm going to take some white, just taking some titanium white and a little bit of Naples yellow, just a dab of it, just to warm up that white. And that's going to start going in this very light area here. And again, just working it in there. This is the light around the edge of those clouds. That goes right up here. So just working that in. And as I come out there, some of the purple mixes with it, and that's fine because it will add a little bit of variety. And this is going to come and sort of run over the edge into this cloud here and make some interesting edges. So here I'm just using the side of the brush to scrabble it across there loosely and softening it off with the edge of the brush, the tip of the brush. And you can see that some of the colour from underneath is coming through here. Some of the purples I put on is blending with that white with a tiny bit of yellow. And the whole idea is to make that look very bright compared to the rest of the cloud. So I'm putting a little bit more here, edging up that cloud. And I can work back into these. These are not sort of static. I will be working back into them. Just getting a little bit of a mix going on there because it's still all wet. So here I am working wet in wet. I could have chosen to work dry in dry, which means I would have to have let everything dry in between the layers. That would have taken us a long time, and I'm sure none of us have that long. So I decided to go for this method. Down here, they're very fluffy clouds, so I've just taken that white-yellow mixture again, picking it up on my brush and just working it round in round sort of shapes, moving my brush around. So you can use a round brush, or as I'm doing, you can use a flat brush, as long as you're moving it around to try and get those shapes. Over here on the edge of this one, I'm adding a little bit of pink to that white and yellow mixture now, to warm up the bottom of these clouds here, and you can see that that's pink. I'll zoom in a minute so you can get a good look at this, how I'm doing it. I'm just dragging it across the sky now. Adding a slight amount of pinks and yellows into that, just to warm it up a little bit. And down here, just warming that all up a little bit too. I don't want to try and recreate this sky exactly. You can just lose your mind trying to replicate things exactly. I want the essence of it, so that's all I'm doing. If you're into really realistic, you can go ahead and do that. So it's now just a matter of keeping working back and forth into there. A little bit more of the purple mix coming up. I'm just scudding around. Here I'm doing a different technique just to show you. I'm just mixing it all up on the surface there rather than on my palette. Just adding in colours as I go and then moving them around with my brush. You can see I get nice lively sort of marks there. So you can do it that way, or you can do it all on your palette and then pop it on. I want to just go back into there and make it a little bit warmer. I'm going to take a round brush to do some of that. I'm mixing up a bit more of the yellow with some white. And going back in. You can see how putting the yellow in really warms it up. It gives you the sense of the sun light playing on it. So I'll do that in some places. What I might do is add a little bit, just adding a little bit of the Ultra Matte Gel. Pop some out on there which I can pick up. Just to give some brush marks, a little bit of body to those clouds in the main part of them. And then you can see how if you want to keep your brush strokes, adding a little bit of the matte gel really helps with those, keeping some brush strokes. And the brush strokes can add to a sense of rhythm and movement in your sky. So I quite like to have some of those. And I'm just going along here, dancing my brush across there, creating some little bits of rhythm and movement through my sky there. Down on the edge of this one, it's quite warm just around the very edge of it, so I'm putting that on with a little round brush. There's a few more clouds coming back there. There's a little bit of the light on these pinky clouds here, so I'm just running my brush along there, and then all around these ones. And again, just loading my brush and letting it sort of work around the edge. If you start from inside your cloud and work out, you start to lose some of the paint by the time you get to the edge, which gives you a more wispy look on the edge, which is desirable because the edges of clouds are wispy. I've worked too much back into there now with the lights, so I need to go back in with the darks. And you'll just find it's push and pull here. You'll put some lights on, then you want to add a bit more dark in, just to keep working around. And here I'm covering some of the lighter cloud and some of my darker cloud, working those darks, shadowed areas up into the cloud. Yeah, just a few around the place. And that one got a bit of shadow on it, and then it's got a lovely light edge again. Some of these clouds are getting little light edges as well. And along the tops of that one. In here we want to have a bit more of a mix. I want the darks to come down to here in a minute, and I want some more of the lights to come along here. So it's going to be sort of a light violet colour. I'm just mixing some of my yellow whites that I had here with the purple dark mix to get that intermediate mix, which I'm putting in a few spots here and just dragging across there to break up that darker cloud mass there. Again, just dancing the brush across paper so it picks up some and leaves others. A few little highlights there, here and there along the tops of the clouds. Right, so it's time just to finish off the shapes and decide, is everything dark and light enough? That one's getting a little boost of darkness in it. This one's getting a little bit down there. This is quite dark up here. I'm just going to drag some of the darks across into the lights there, just to give the wispy effect of trailing edges of the clouds coming across, and it's just putting my brush on the side and dragging it out over the lights. Because you can do it the other way as well, with the lights dragging over the darker ones. And I want some of that dark to come down into this cloud around these lighter clouds here. So just dancing it across again. I might pick up a little bit more of that gel and just mix in with it and just dance it down right around the lighter shapes. And because it's still the one underneath is still a bit wet, then they mix quite well. Just making this a little bit darker and deeper shadowed there, and then I'm picking up some of the lights, working that back in as well. And you get nice soft transitions doing that between the shadow side and the deeper dark and the lighter side. And some darks there. And I'm going back now to put in some more warmer colours, and I'm just taking that red, and it's the teeniest bit that I'm just adding into some white, and I just keep mixing it till I get a few different strengths of it. And then that's going in as well, just as some little bits of warm there. So you can also use your finger just to blend a little bit if you want, just the tip of your finger, like you would with pastels if you're a pastelist, similar kind of thing, and I do that quite often. This has got quite a lot of pink in it, so just look carefully at your clouds and try and identify where the warmer colours are coming from, and just pop some of those in with those little brush strokes, so that you get a wispy look there to it. And then if you need it to be softer, I do want to blend it in a bit. I've just wet my brush slightly, and I'm just wetting the edges a little bit to smooth them out. Otherwise it just picks up all the texture underneath on the canvas and can look a bit rough. And if you want the smoother look, you just need to blend it out a little bit of water on your brush a little bit of a finger there, any of those things will work. And that's just softened off those parts of the clouds there. Up in this mess, it's all too dark, so I need to lighten off some areas of it because there are some lightened areas. So I'm just going in there and adding in some little bits of softer, lighter colours, and again patting around some of it with my finger. You have to be careful when you're using the ateliers or the golden opens, because if you get too much water on them, it'll just open up the layer up below, unless it's really dry. So they stay workable for a long time, which means you can be picking up the colour and moving it. And there I was getting a little bit of the white from the canvas right there before I even started toning the canvas, so it's coming through a little bit. It's not so bad because it's a cloud, but if you've got an area you don't want it to, just be careful with these open paints because they do stay movable and workable for a long time, unlike a traditional acrylic that dries out very quickly. So now I've got some variation going on up there. I'm going to add a little bit more variation down in this one, and I really would like to blue it off slightly. I've got it very purple. I'm just going to blue it off a little bit more, just by adding a little bit of more ultramarine blue to it. And then I'm going to add slight bit of pink coming around here just to lighten that area off. And going back and adding in slightly more of the yellow just to get that. Ooh, yes, just be careful to clean your brushes off in between or you end up with mud, which I don't want. So a little bit of yellow, quite a lot more white, and that's just going to be used to fluff up those clouds now for the final edge effect. And so I've put the really clean bright on the edge, and now I'm just pulling it back into the wetter purples, so it knocks it back a bit but keeps the edge nice and clean and warm. So I've worked back into that cloud, and now I'm going to just edge up over here with a little bit more of the warm. Just anywhere I feel it needs it. I do keep looking back at the photo for this to get some idea of it. So we've got some very sunlit light edges to the clouds in this spot and in this spot, and that's giving us a nice little bit of contrast, a little sense of light going on in those storm clouds. And then up here it's softer, and I'm going to just soften that out a little bit more. I don't want quite so much of a sense of movement there. I want that cloud to be slightly flatter area of light, so just pulling it across and wisping some out, just pulling it out softly there to make a little bit of a wispy edge over some of these edges here. I want to just give a little bit of highlight to the edge of that cloud too. Okay. Well, I think that's done for now for the clouds, except I've just noticed I need a little bit more of a highlight along there, so I'm just putting some of that brightness in that area there, just a little bit of it. Now it's time to do a bit of squinting and see if your values are right. And as I squint there, I can see that that's probably a little bit too dark there and should be a little bit lighter. So I'll just take in my whites and mix with a little bit of the purple there. Just knock that back slightly so it blends in a little bit more. That's a bit better. That in fact there is a little bit of blue sky, and that's what's causing all that sunlight. So I'm going to put in a tiny touch of blue sky, which is just a little spot of phthalo blue, which is very, very strong, and a little touch of ultramarine, and then a little splodge of white just to tone it down a bit. And that's just going to go in there as a little section of blue sky showing through there. So I've got the blue sky in, and then I just go over the edge of that with some of this cloud. Just to shape it a little bit. I didn't want such a big sky hole. So I've got a little touch of blue coming through there, and I'm going to add a tiny touch of that down under these clouds here, but it's not going to be allowed to be staying that blue, so just take some more of the ultramarine. I just wanted it a little bit of the sky colour to show through there as well, sort of tinting in between the clouds. So I'm popping a little bit of that in. Like I said before, they're not, you can do what you like, they're your clouds. So you don't have to keep them the same as in the original. I'm taking a slight amount of that again and just adding it now over into this area as well. Just to add a little touch of blue to some of those clouds there, where the sky is trying to peek through in a few spots. Just adding some little bits of it in here as well to all that purple. Okay. I'm not going to do very much more to those clouds at the moment. At this stage we want to move on to the rest of the painting, but I'll probably come back and fiddle a bit more later on. See, I can't, it's hard to resist just fiddling as you go. Just wanted to there's a lovely circular motion you use with your brush to, as you get towards the edge, to soften the edges out. At this stage, I'm just going to give my brushes a bit of clean, and then we'll get ready for the landscape. For the landscape, I want to use more of the matte gel, mixing it in to get some texture in there. I'm going to start back here along the horizon, just for a change. Let's use a bit of the palette knife as well. So I'm not going to worry about cleaning up that, because I don't mind some of that mixing with my green. I'm going to take one of the pre-mixed greens and pop it on there, but then I'm going to add in a bit of ultramarine and a lot of purple and mix that up. Maybe a bit more purple. And that's going to be the deep base of those trees. And I'm just taking it on to my palette knife, a nice big blob, and tapping it on to the canvas. And I get a nice lot of texture. Now this lot, just to show you that you don't need the matte gel, if you use a nice thick paint mix, is just the paint. There's no matte gel in it. I can add some matte gel to give it a little bit more structure if I want to, but I don't really need to at this stage. And I'm just moving it. It's a round tip palette knife. I'm just moving it down like that. Now if you don't have a palette knife, like I said, you can just cut up anything that's a bit flexible, like a piece of plastic out of a milk carton or an old credit card, into thin and thick strips, so you've got some different widths, and use those to work with. And I'm going down, having not mixed it all the way on my palette. It's going to need a lot more dark in the base, but this is the start. I'm actually now adding in a tiny touch of alizarin crimson to it as well. Just sort of grey off the blue a bit, the green a bit. Here I go, just putting it in, it comes back there. And there's another little patch of it here. It's going to go on. And a big one over here. And I'm using more of the surface area of my palette knife to do that. So here's one old credit card. Some have got round edges. I've cut them into strips with round edges. Some are thin, some are thick, just to show you that you can do that, use those effectively as well. So again, I would just pick it up here and start dabbing it on, and it works fine too. Just vary the way you hold it to get different effects. And if I want to have a nice line going down there for the field, I could use the long side of it. And what I want to do is just get some lighter green, and I can just take the long edge of that and drag it across. So this is just to show you how to use a few different techniques to mix up your painting a little bit and get some different effects. And I'm just putting it on, and then I'm pulling it down in the direction of the slope of that field. You get some nice textural marks there from the edge of the credit card too. So even when your boat is spent, there's a use for your credit card. I need to put in a little rise there, which I've kind of missed. So I'm going to drag it down that way. And now I'm just pulling back and making a different green, laying a different green over that first one to give me another sort of rise there. Of course, you don't need to use a credit card if you've got a palette knife. You can just use the palette knife, and it's the same thing. Just load up, scrape the side of it, the reeds here. And I'm just pulling that up as a base, and I can go into that later. And you can see how I can use the edge of it to pull some of those reeds up. And I can do the same along the edge of these grasses too. They have some areas that have got more shadows in them, and I'm just using the tip of my palette knife But if you don't like using a palette knife, you can use your brush. So I'm just going back into brushwork now, picking up some of those and just moving it along the edge, pulling some up just by stroking up with my brush there. I can get some bits of shadow going on, and it will mix with those other colours that I've already put in, the lighter colours, and sort of blend it together. So that's using the brush. And you get a different effect with each of these, but one's not necessarily better than the other, they're just different. And the brush will mix it up quite nicely and help it to blend together. So I'm moving that all the way out there, and then there's a lot more darks going on over here too, so I'm laying in some of those darks now. So look where your shadows are, lay in the darks. By using the darks from the background, it's going to help me blend and harmonise the painting. So over here where I had these ones, I can pull them up with my brush as well to blend them. I can go back in later and add in some more darks and more specific shapes if I want to, some single grasses and so on. If you run out, just mix a little bit more up. And here I'll mix up the basic mix I had back there, which was the ultramarine and the purple. I'm adding in a bit of raw burnt sienna, just to give it a bit more of a warmer feeling towards as we come forward. And just stroking that over the top of those. Bringing it out to the sides, just with those brush strokes. I'm going to go back in and do the stream now so that I can start tying this together. I think I brought that over too far. Maybe not too bad. That's about halfway, so it's not quite halfway. So I'm trying to keep the composition working as I go. I have some little bits of tidying up to do back there, and I'm going to do that with just the brush now. So some more trees back there, and they're a little bit further away, so I'm just bluing those off a little bit. So I've got some further away trees that are a little bit bluer and greyer than the ones in the front, and that one where it overlaps them is getting a nice bit of dark edge to it. And this is where the brush is good too, just tapping it on, patting it on to make the shadow areas in there. Okay, so we have a nice line of dark trees against that skyline. We've got the field coming in, and now I'm going to start edging up the pond. The pond has got dark little edge there, so I'm just going to work back into that wet area there and make the pond edge. I'm not so worried that the green's in there, because there's little greens at the end of the edge of the pond too in the water, so I'm going to be using that to shape them, and I'll put some more blues back in. There's greens out there. And a whole lot of greens coming down here with bits of water in between them, where the reeds are starting to grow around, and it's a quite wet area. So I'm just using the brush to put some of those in, mixing them up with the other greens that I've got to create a whole lot of different greens at the water's edge there. And back along the edge here, it's not quite so bright green. I'm just knocking that back a bit, especially because we're coming out to the edge of the canvas, and I don't want it to get too interesting out here. I want it to be a little bit more neutral at the edge so that my eye isn't let out. In here, I'm just going to brush some green along the edge of that pond, and then I'm going to go back in and put a little bit of that sky colour in again. So the sky's full. I had too much of that green, so you can take your palette knife or your bit of credit card and just pull some of that out. I'm just scraping it off, scraping back into it. And then I'm going to be putting in some more of the sky blue. Just mixing up a little bit more. And I don't want it too blue, so a tiny bit of red goes in it too to cool it off a bit. And then just pulling that down. It's mixing with the green. I might let it dry a bit before I continue pulling the sky down there. So I want the sky colour to be a bit more dominant than the green. It will have some of that pinky white that I had in there too from the clouds, so it'll be a couple of spotches of that, one under there, one under that cloud there, and I'm just loading my brush and gently pulling it so that it just glides across the top there. And then I might have a little bit over here too. Blue. If I don't pull too hard, I'm just lining it atop the greens there, and it's not picking too much of it up, which is the look I'm looking for. Pulling it down gently, and I'm just using a flat brush to do this. When it gets down into this area, it becomes more a murky green. I'm taking some of the blue and mixing it with the green from the trees and using that as a sort of murky kind of colour that's going to be down here amongst this part of the river. And by mixing various colours from other areas of your painting into a new area, you start to unify it. So I'm just using some of that green I used in the trees, some of my sky blue, mixing them up together, and then just running them along this creaky bit. Even some of the yellow out of the paddock, out of those ones, is going in there as well. And it gives you a nice bit of harmony. It's light because you're still getting the cloud reflections in there, so there's some white reflecting into it, but because it's shallow and it's a bit muddy, those reflections are not true. So they're mixing with the pigment in the water and the mud at the bottom of that little creek bed to give it a more sort of greeny look to it. Putting a little bit of white in there to mix in with it and lighten that one off a bit with a touch of the yellow. So we're getting some reflections in there, and that water goes back into these reds as well. So I'm just putting some of that water colour all the way through there, down here. And just in and out in the edge there, to make a more natural looking edge. So I've got the basis now of the water. And now I'm going to do a bit more work on the paddock there. Well, in Australia, that's what we call them, paddocks. I know it's probably fields or pastures where you are. Meadows. These are paddocks. So a lot more green's going in there, and I'm just going to mix up a bit of green. And again, now I can use this apply this in a number of different ways. I'm mixing some darker greens, and I'm again using the basis of what I've already got there. Just mixing up a few different greens. So I have also a fan brush. Now that's another good way to apply grass. So I'm just running it through there, and then you can see how it makes very realistic looking grass, especially if you apply it through a couple of different, darker and a light at the same time. So I can just put that on, and I'm putting it through that area up there as well where I put that yellow ochre, and I'll go back and put some more yellow ochre, but this is to put some of the darker areas in. So when you get closer up, you can try using a fan brush if you have one. If you have some old house brushes, they're pretty good too. One of my favourite brushes is a little 1-inch house brush that's just absolutely mutilated, and that is quite nice as well. It just dabs. I need a bit more paint than I've got, so I'm just going to mix up a bit more paint. Put those two over there out of the way. I just mix up a little bit more paint with my palette knife. Just need a whole lot more paint, so I'll grab some out. Mixing up a good supply now of some different greens. Nice dark one over here, a bit of a lighter one, then over here I've got some more of that yellow ochre with a touch of red in it too. So a few different ones. If I take this big house brush and just dab it in there, and then just start, you can see how quickly that covers it and makes quite believable grass as well. So there's some of that lighter green on top of those rushes, and I can put that in by just dragging down with the house brush, and it makes great grasses there. So if you've got some house brushes you're thinking of throwing out, don't. They make great specialty brushes for grasses and so on. So in this area I'm just putting in a whole lot of different greens with the big old house brush. Some of those yellows are going in as well, the ochre ones. Just put touches of those, and while I've got the brush loaded with that, I'm going over here and dragging it down too to put some more closer up tops of those grasses in those colours. I'm pulling it right out here, across there, across the edge towards the pond. That's going to need some more darks in it, and I can do those in a minute. I just want to get this in to start. Okay. A few more of those in there for a bit of variety. And then just keep going with the old paint house brush. And it's good when it pulls into the other colours that you've got there because it mixes them up in a very random way that if you tried to do it yourself wouldn't be nearly as successful. If you just let the brush do the work, you have more success often if you've got a really good brush. So once you get a good brush, cherish it. Getting a really good variety of colours in there. And I've kept that nice and dark there. Might put a couple of the lighter colours in amongst those rushes and on the tops of these ones here. Just sort of blending it in a bit up over the darker shadow bit. And then I want it to be quite dark down in the corner. Not too much detail along here. I'm just pulling it up. You can let this dry and then go over it again if you want, so if you don't want to mix them. Or you can just use them wet in wet as I'm doing here and take what you get from that. And if you let them dry, then you can go over with a really fine liner if you want to get a few fine things like some grass heads and so on. So that's a good little start for the grasses there. I can put a few darker ones in there at the edges. Then I want to put in a bit more dark over there, and I've got this brush now a bit too light with so it's going to get it clean out. And I'm going to dip my fan brush in some of those darks and go back and pull down some darker areas there. And even going back over this side and laying in a few darker bits along the edge there to soften it up a bit. And that's just dabbing with the ends of my loaded fan brush there. Then I just want to put some more lights on the top of these ones to help them separate from the water a little bit more. So I can go around with my fan brush now if I want to and just add in some highlight areas as well. And a lot of the blue background was showing there. I was trying to get rid of a bit of it, so I'm just using my fan brush to just gently scrape along there. And that adds a little bit more colour to that field back there. I can do it here as well if I want, just to give some variation to that paddock, or field, or meadow, whatever you want to call it. I need to lighten this area up. And other than that, I'm reasonably happy with it. I might put a few more darks in here, and what they might be is absolutely pure purple. So just putting it in a few bits of really dark, strong purples there, just to make a few good shadowed areas. And I'm going to do a little bit more work with the, I'll show you my other brush that I really like. I might have shown you this one before. It was a regular brush that I used a lot for splattering, and now it's got, I broke it off by tapping it too hard, but it's got lovely little irregular ends to it, which work great for putting in grasses. Just lightening that area off a little bit and putting a few extra colours in it too. I'll add a few more bits like that down here, just where the sun light's catching on some of those grass tops. And there's some old seed heads and so on there. And it just makes it a little bit more interesting. And it's so quick and easy to do if you've got a raggedy sort of brush to do it. Over here I am putting just a little bit of that warm colour behind the creek pond thing as well. Just by dragging it across the existing colours. Going to work back now. That should be a bit drier now, so I can go back into that and just add a little bit more of what I wanted to add in previously. Along here I'm just going to lighten it right off. More bluey colour and a bit more of the purpley colours as well, because there's a lot of purple in the sky. So we don't want to forget that and make it too sunny reflections when it's really quite purple as well. So all I'm doing is adding in colours from the sky into the water now. And greening up the water there. There's a little touch of reflections there from the distant trees too, so I'm just going to lay in a little bit of dark reflection in the water as well. And some of that down as well. And a little bit of reflection from the bank. So if we do the little test with squinting the eyes, this probably all needs to be a wee bit lighter, so I'm actually going to lighten up that water a bit. There, which will be as a result of some of the cloud reflections in it. and maybe 1 or 2 little reeds. So if you want to just put 1 or 2 little reeds in there, use a very thin fine liner, just a couple of hairs on it, and that will allow you to pull up just a few and have much better control of. I don't use the fine liners very much, but they're good for just, oops, she says that making a mess of it. They're good for this purpose, just to have nice control over a few placements of some little fine lines. And they will reflect, of course, down into the water, slightly lighter than they are, and remember to go opposite angle to the up. And then let's pull one over there then. And at this stage, if you're finding it hard with your fine liners to do it, just take a little bit of your liquefying medium or a bit of water if you don't have any liquefying medium. It just increases the viscosity, so the sliperiness of it, and then you can move it around much better. Because if you've got a very fine haired one, it hasn't actually got much surface area to pick up any of the paint with. And then what I'm just doing is putting a little ripple thing across the surface there to show where the surface is with the reflection. It's just very slight, hard to see it all. Make it slightly more. Now is your time to stand back and assess and see. Let's just pull it back a bit. Now's the time to step back from it, assess it and see how you feel. Is the balance in your sky right? Is there enough soft edges? Are there enough shadows in there? Have you got some wispy bits pulling across the dark, across the light, and the light across the dark? Have you got a sense of light on some of those cloud edges? Then look at your tree line. Do you have a nice crisp edge where the field is running across there? Do you have shadows at the base of your trees and working up into your trees, but more sunlit on the top? Are the trees further back a little bit bluer and a little bit greener as they come forward? Have you got a nice bit of variety in those meadows? Have you not just put one colour green? Have you put a number of greens? Do you get some good vertical strokes here delineating the grasses? So you can see some individual grasses in the foreground. Not too many, because that will detract from the whole painting, but you want to see some indication that there are individual reeds there. Are your reflections what you want them to be? Have you allowed the paint to mix too much so that the blue isn't blue enough, it's gone too green because you've picked up some green from underneath? So think about those kind of things. Look at it as a whole and think, is there anything I would like to change? So when we look at the reference photo, I've actually upped the contrast a bit. You don't need to do that. That was my choice. I wanted to have a little bit more contrast in it, a little bit more variations in the fields, a bit more of a sense of sunlight back there. And so I chose to do that. You don't need to choose to do that. You can choose to do it more like the photo there. I could put more detail in here. You can see that there's some little individual fronds in there, and I could put those in. You could choose to put a few little spots of colour in there if you wanted to. You could add in some clover, some pink clover, or you could add in some yellow buttercups if you want to add a little bit more colour. You've always got the opportunity with a nature painting like this to add in some extra colour where you want it. I haven't put in these reed beds in the middle. You can do that or not. So you can make the changes that you want to change. I hope that you've learned something from this, and I've tried to use a variety of techniques to put the paint on so that you could get an idea of what you can achieve with that. I look forward to our next painting together, and in the meantime, enjoy painting this scene. Okay, if you do if you do paint this scene as a practice, I'd love to see it on the community page or on the Facebook group. If you'd like to join the Facebook group, just message me in Messenger and then I can add you, or just send me your email address and I can add you that way. Okay, lovely talking to you again. See you next time. Bye for now.